the Bennion report, Financial Participation of Employees in Companies proceeds. I give the floor to Mr. Bennion.
Thank you, Chair. The financial participation of employees in companies' proceeds is a concrete way for companies to share success. It is a long-supported Liberal vision set out by Joe Grimmond in the 1960s and taken forward by many successful companies such as John Lewis in the United Kingdom. It is a practical example of the inclusive growth referred to in the Europe 2020 strategy and can empower citizens through employment by allowing them to play an integrated role in the company for which they work. Across the EU there are many different models of EFP, but the main models are profit sharing, individual employee share ownership and employee stock ownership plans. The category or model chosen will often depend on the type and size of the company, as well as the intended aims of starting such a scheme. The concept of employee financial participation offers many advantages. It can assist in the transfer of companies to employees when a single successor cannot be found. This is particularly useful for SMEs and micro-enterprises. It promotes sustainability and long-termism in decision-making, which can benefit both employees and employers. For employees, it can enhance their commitment to the future success of the company and can give them an opportunity to participate in governance. For employers, it can encourage investment in training by increasing the company's ability to retain skilled workers in the long term. There can also be improvements in employee job satisfaction and motivation, which can in turn lead to a boost in productivity. Despite these benefits, participation in EFP schemes varies between different sectors, company sizes, demographics of employees and between member states. In this area, Europe is lagging behind other places, particularly the United States. In this report, I have looked at the reasons for this and the potential obstacles to EFP take-up in the Union. Firstly, there is the lack of information about how EFP schemes operate and can be implemented. Answering these questions can be costly and burdensome for companies, in particular SMEs and micro-enterprises. Secondly, there is a lack of national legislative incentive measures in some member states. Thirdly, EFP schemes are affected by national taxation regimes. The taxation elements, of course, of this report were produced by the Econ Committee and not by the EMPL Committee. Finally, companies operate cross-border are faced with a multitude of EFP schemes and national legislation. Following on from this, the report makes a number of recommendations to overcome these obstacles and increase the number of EFP schemes operated within the Union. For example, best practice examples of EFP schemes and incentive measures should be shared between member states and interested bodies. This could lead to mutual recognition of these schemes, which could simplify the process for cross-border companies. The report makes reference to the current pilot project and the benefits that a virtual EFP centre and the tax rate calculator could bring in augmenting the available information. These propositions would be of particular use to companies operating cross-border. We also call for the Commission to do an impact assessment on a possible 29th regime. This regime should operate outside of the areas of national competence, such as taxation, should be voluntary and should be based on a set of best practice examples for each type and size of company. Additionally, we recommend that a set of basic guidelines for successful EFP schemes be developed. Firstly, the decision to implement a scheme should be taken at company level. Participation should be in addition to remuneration and employment rights. It should be voluntary for employees, who should be provided with all the relevant information in order to make an informed decision. And finally, if the model involves shares, then collective ownership is a positive option. Finally, the report proposes the creation of a single information portal which sets out the advantages, disadvantages, potential incentives and mechanisms of the scheme. I hope these recommendations will be taken forward by the Commission and interested organisations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Essayah.
Arvoisa puhemies, Työllisyysvaliokunnassa todellakin totesin.
Thank you, President. The Commission has decided that employee financial participation varies greatly from one member state to another. There are very different conditions prevailing. There are also different models which are used, or the same models which are used in different ways, and this can have an impact on the way in which financial participation will operate because of the different decision-taking processes and investment decision-taking within companies. Looking at the legislation, I think the most important thing is to exchange information between member states. Financial participation is always on a voluntary basis. There have been a lot of recommendations, there are a lot of good practices, so I think an exchange of information between employees will be very useful. I don't think it's enough to provide incentives to management.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Regner.
First of all, I'd like to thank the rapporteur for his very cooperative approach to working on this report. Financial participation of employees is an excellent example of one area in which we in the European Union can learn from each other. There are lots of examples of financial participation, the staff foundations in Austria, or the sociedades or the work societies in Spain, just to mention two examples. And as the Social Democrat rapporteur, I'd also like to stress that it's important that certain conditions must be complied with when such models are introduced. First of all, and above all, such agreements should be voluntary in nature and must be accessible to all workers. Social partners must be involved, and participation in these schemes should only be over and above basic pay. I think if we can combine these various different elements, I think we can hope to set up an effective system for the future, but this must be done on a step-by-step basis, not overnight.
Mrs. Tomasic.
I support this initiative because I believe it will enable better performance for European employers. It will make the companies more stable in the long term, and it will additionally link the employees to the companies, thereby making them more motivated and more efficient. I'm glad that the rapporteur has put a stress on the danger of abuse of this model, because there is a real danger of abuse. In order to eliminate this danger, the models of the financial participation of employees must be completely harmonized with the national legislations and the taxation legislation. They must be voluntary, and they must be offered to the employees along with all the necessary information. In spite of the efforts, all of the efforts, we must be aware of the fact that labor relations have been regulated differently in the different countries, and that they will not be easily implemented in all the member states. Also, I think we must respect the competencies of national states in the area of taxation, and that the Commission should not interfere in the taxation of the financial participation of employees. Thank you.
Yes. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is a very interesting report indeed, and thank you to the rapporteur. Indeed, the financial participation of employees is a very progressive measure. This provides not only additional financial incentives to the employees, but this also includes the employees into the strategic decisions in the company, which in turn strengthens their interest in contributing to the improvement of the work of the company and provides them with the fruits of their labor. It is regrettable that this measure has not been developed sufficiently. Therefore, it is very meaningful discussion which takes place here on how the situation could be changed in the member states and what models should be applied. I am only in favor of a voluntary participation, And in addition to that, we should apply additional protection measures in order to avoid undesirable effects.
Köszönöm szépen. Amikor olvastam,
Thank you very much. When I was reading this report about financial participation for employees, I was reminded that a few weeks ago in Budapest, I was visiting a small bookstore, a small one, which is a rare thing in Hungary because the big chains tend to eat up the little ones. And the owner of this shop asked me, Christina, what do you think is the reason that the owner of a large book retailer chain is one of the richest people in Hungary, and we are here working for him, and we make 250 euros per month, and we have degrees and experience. It would be fairer to have a share of this profit, of this huge profit that the CEO makes. So this makes this report even more interesting for us.
Thank you, President. Honourable members. In the name of the Commission, I wish to thank the Rapporteur, Mr. Phil Bennion, the Employment and the Econ Committees, and the European Parliament as a whole for the work done on the report and the resolution on employment financial participation. The resolution provides a comprehensive overview of concrete initiatives which should be considered by the Member States and by the Commission to encourage and facilitate employee financial participation across the European Union. More than 30 years of research support the conclusion that companies that are partly or entirely owned by their employees are more profitable, create more jobs and pay more taxes than their competitors without employee share ownership. Employee share ownership also strengthens corporate governance and has a positive impact on employee motivation and also on retention. Companies with employee share ownership also don't relocate as easily as some other companies do. On the contrary, companies partially owned by employees are more strongly embedded in local communities and regions. Furthermore, since employees are long-term stakeholders par excellence, broadening employee shareholding is also a source of long-term financing, which can help to stabilise capital markets. The resolution also rightly emphasises the particular importance of employee share ownership for small and medium-sized enterprises. SMEs constitute the vital texture of our economy, and employee share ownership can help sustain the success of commercial and social enterprises. For all these reasons, I welcome this resolution and an important contribution to the execution of the Commission's inclusive growth strategy to ensuring that we emerge faster and stronger from the economic and financial crisis. The Commission takes note of all the recommendations in the resolution, which comes at a very timely moment indeed. As highlighted in the resolution, the Commission is now implementing a pilot project on the promotion of employee ownership and participation. The purpose of this project is, first, to identify the reasons underpinning the wide divergences in approaches across Member States. We will focus on the main drivers behind the cost and administrative complexities that are hampering a large-scale introduction of financial participation schemes, in particular in cross-border scenarios. Second, we will analyse in detail the possible regulatory and non-regulatory actions that might be proposed or undertaken by the Commission. It goes without saying that we will very carefully consider the Parliament's recommendations. Among all the sound recommendations, Commissioner Barnier has signalled to me that he is particularly interested in a potential opt-in 29th regime as a possible way forward. Third, with a view to promoting awareness and facilitating the sharing of information and best practices, the Commission will host a conference later this month in Brussels, where the interim results of this project will be presented and discussed with all stakeholders. I am very pleased that Ms Beres and Mr Bennion have accepted to actively participate in the event. Finally, I should nevertheless say that there are obvious limits to what can be done by the Commission. Indeed, in view of the important role of taxation, the Member States control one of the most effective levers to boost employee share ownership. I would therefore join Parliament and its call on the Council to carefully consider this important resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The discussion is closed. The vote will be tomorrow at 12.